Sirens sliced through the quiet suburban night, painting the street in red and blue. Curtains fluttered as sleepy neighbors peeked out, whispering and gasping. The air reeked of panic and smoke, though there was no fire. Only chaos. Two firefighters stumbled out the front door of the neat little house, faces flushed with disbelief. Between them they carried two somethings, tangled, half-covered and groaning in pain. The crowd gasped as the figures came into focus. A man and a woman bare, stuck together like two sides of a cruel joke. From the sidewalk, a woman in a soft blue robe stood perfectly still, a cup of tea cooling in her hands. Her face was unreadable, no tears, no rage, just the faintest curve of her lips. The reporters would later describe her as calm, composed, cold. But if you looked closely, really closely, you'd see the tremor in her fingertips. Not fear, not guilt. Release. Someone shouted, "Is that her husband?" Another voice, "My God, what happened to them?" The firefighters exchanged glances, muttering about chemical burns and emergency separation procedures. The man screamed again, a pitiful sound that made even the paramedics wince. And still she didn't move. The camera flash from a neighbor's phone briefly illuminated her face, pale, serene, untouchable. The sound of latex gloves snapping, scissors cutting, and desperate pleading filled the air. Somewhere in the distance, a dog barked. Then softly, almost too soft to notice, her voice rose above the noise. "You want to know how we got here?" The scene cuts. A sunlit kitchen, the same house but brighter, cleaner, the walls painted in morning gold. A man in a crisp shirt kisses her cheek as he rushes out the door. He smells like cologne and confidence. Voiceover. "They said we were the perfect couple. We smiled at dinner parties. We held hands at church. We laughed like people who'd never tasted bitterness." The montage continues, anniversaries, photos, toasts with friends. But in every frame his eyes are elsewhere. On his phone, on the waitress, on anything that wasn't her. "And I believed in him," her voice continues, softer now. "I believed in us until I didn't." The screen flickers back to the flashing lights of that terrible night, the chaos, the screams, the disbelief. And her standing there, calm in the middle of ruin. "Because that night," she whispers, "I stopped being the fool." The night before the chaos, the house glowed with soft golden light. Candles flickered across the dinner table, their flames trembling like hope that refused to die. The wife moved carefully, setting the last plate in place, roast chicken, mashed potatoes, his favorite red wine breathing on the counter. Outside, rain brushed against the windows in delicate threads. Inside, the clock ticked louder than it ever had. He was late again. She straightened the napkin for the fourth time, glancing at her reflection in the window, lipstick perfect, hair just right. She still cared how she looked when he walked through the door, still wanted to be seen. At 9:47, the sound of tires on gravel made her heart leap. She smoothed her dress, checked her breath, and forced a smile. The front door opened with a rush of cold air and excuses. "Sorry, babe, emergency meeting, you know how it is." He kissed her cheek, too fast, too distracted. She inhaled and froze. Perfume, sweet, expensive, not hers. For a second she almost said it, almost asked, but his phone buzzed and he turned away too quickly, muttering something about clients. Her hands, still holding the serving spoon, trembled just slightly. She placed it down and sat across from him. "So," she said softly, "how was your day?" He smiled, the kind of smile that hides behind walls. "Busy, you know me." She nodded, smiling back, pretending the lie didn't sting. Pretending she didn't notice the smudge of lipstick on his collar that wasn't her shade. Dinner went on like a play, lines rehearsed, laughter timed. He talked about deadlines, she asked about the weather. Under the table her hands stayed clenched in her lap, nails pressing crescents into her palms. After he'd eaten, he kissed her forehead, the same practiced gesture he'd used for years. "You spoil me," he murmured. She watched him walk upstairs, his phone lighting up again as he typed something fast and secret. She memorized the rhythm of his thumbs, the small, guilty curve of his smile. When the bedroom door shut, she blew out the candles one by one. Each flame died with a soft hiss, like a whisper of truth escaping. The next morning, sunlight spilled into the kitchen, too bright for the heaviness in her chest. He was in the shower, humming something careless. His phone sat on the counter. Unlocked. Her pulse quickened. She wasn't the kind of woman who snooped, not before. But something about the way he'd said emergency meeting, the way that perfume lingered on his jacket burned inside her. She reached for the phone, fingers shaking. One tap opened the messages. And there it was. Her breath caught. Hearts, photos, voice notes, words that used to belong to her. Last night was amazing. You taste like sin. She has no idea. Her throat went dry, the tiles under her feet seemed to sway. She didn't cry, not yet. Instead, she stared at the screen until her reflection blurred in the glass, until the sound of the shower stopped upstairs. Then she placed the phone back exactly where it was, smoothed her hair, and smiled at her own calmness, the stillness before the storm. Because sometimes, silence is just the sound of a plan being born. The phone screen glowed in her hands like a small, cruel sun. Each message burned her eyes, but she couldn't look away. You free tonight? Room 312 again, I'll bring wine. Can't wait to see you tonight, face blowing a kiss. Her thumb scrolled slowly, deliberately, as if each flick might reveal a different truth, a mistake, a misunderstanding, anything to make this nightmare unreal. But there it was. Hotel bookings, photos, inside jokes. Even a selfie, the other woman, half-dressed, smirking into the camera with the kind of confidence only betrayal can breed. The wife's reflection shone in the black glass, calm face, blank eyes, jaw locked tight. Inside, humiliation rose like acid. Her husband's voice floated down from upstairs. Honey, where's my blue tie? She swallowed hard, forcing her voice steady. Second drawer. He hummed in response, unaware that his perfect world had just cracked open. Her hands trembled as she set the phone down on the table. For a long moment, she simply sat there, listening to the sound of the shower running, the water masking the sound of her heart breaking. She looked around their kitchen, the one they'd remodeled together. His mug, his papers, his half-finished coffee. Every piece of him was here, woven into her life like a spell. And yet, she realized, he'd already left her piece by piece, moment by moment, long before she ever saw the proof. Her throat ached, but no tears came. Instead, a strange stillness settled inside her. The kind that comes after a storm has taken everything. She opened the phone again, reading deeper. You smell so good. She doesn't suspect a thing. Let's make it wild this time, bring the lube, winking face. The last message hit her like a slap. Her fingers froze mid-scroll. It was ordinary, playful, disgusting, and yet it felt like the final insult, the kind that strips even pain of its dignity. She pressed the phone to her chest and closed her eyes. The silence around her grew heavy, thick with betrayal. For a fleeting second, she imagined confronting him. The shouting, the accusations, the tears. But then she saw his face in her mind, the practiced regret, the fake apologies, the tired excuses. No, he didn't deserve her anger, he deserved her silence. Because silence can be sharper than any scream. She stood, moving mechanically, cleaning the untouched coffee cup, straightening the chair, folding the napkin he'd left crumpled. Her movements were small, deliberate, the gestures of a woman holding herself together 1 inch at a time. Outside, a seagull cried somewhere over the grey sky. The sound made her flinch, raw, lonely, echoing. She picked up the phone one last time and looked at the final message again. Bring the lube, winking face. Her lips twitched, not into a smile, not quite. Something colder, something dangerous. Because that was the moment the heartbreak stopped being pain and started becoming purpose. The night air was cool, the kind that carried sound too clearly. From the front window she watched him step into his car, clean shirt, slicked hair, that same cologne she'd once loved and now hated. But he wasn't alone. The passenger door opened, and she got in, the other woman, laughing, her hand brushing his thigh like she owned it. The wife stood in the shadows, watching them drive off together. Her fingers dug into the curtain fabric until her knuckles turned white. The streetlight flickered once, like the world was mocking her. The neighbors across the street waved at the passing car, smiling. To them, the couple was still perfect, the polished pair with Sunday barbecues and polite small talk. Nobody knew the truth hiding beneath the smiles. She let the curtain fall back into place and turned toward the living room. It looked too clean, too calm. A museum of her own devotion, years of loyalty framed and dusted, staring back at her. Her eyes landed on the wedding photo above the fireplace. White dress, his arm around her waist. That smile, the one that had fooled her for so long. She stepped closer, studying it. She used to see love in that picture, now she only saw performance. The silence in the house was thick, pressing on her chest. Her hands were cold, her mind not so much, it was clear, almost frighteningly so. She sat down on the couch, the wedding album in her lap, flipping through the pages slowly. Smiles, honeymoon, promises, lies. She stopped at one photo, the two of them by the sea, his hand holding hers. She tore it neatly down the middle. The sound of paper ripping echoed louder than it should have. Something inside her shifted, a soft click, like a lock turning. The ache didn't disappear, but it hardened, turned into something she could use. She wasn't going to cry anymore. She wasn't going to beg for an explanation, or wait for him to come home pretending to be tired from work. No, she was done being the fool. In the kitchen, the faint scent of his aftershave still lingered, a ghost she couldn't escape. She opened the cupboard and stared at the rows of neatly arranged bottles and jars, the tiny symbols of her carefully maintained life. And then her eyes fell on it. The small white bottle he kept at the back of the shelf. The one labelled personal use. Her fingers hovered over it. Slowly, deliberately, she picked it up and turned it over in her hands. Her lips parted slightly. A thought, dark, precise, and wicked, began to form. She laughed once under her breath, the sound low and foreign to her own ears. The clock on the wall ticked, marking the moment she crossed an invisible line. She walked back to the living room, glancing again at the torn wedding photo lying on the floor. She didn't feel sadness anymore, only clarity. The kind of clarity that comes when love dies and something far colder takes its place. She picked up the photo, folded it once and whispered softly to the empty house. "Let's see how close you two really want to be." The memories came like old film reels, soft, golden, deceitful. Their first apartment, the night he knelt on one knee in the tiny living room, the way his voice trembled when he said, "I'll never hurt you." She had believed him with everything she had. Every promise, every forever. Now those same words echoed through an empty house, the same walls that once held laughter now listening to silence. She moved through the rooms barefoot, her robe brushing against the floor, eyes scanning everything she once loved. The furniture they chose together, the candle set she saved for anniversaries, the faint indentation of his body on the couch where he'd fallen asleep after late meetings. Everything looked familiar, but it didn't feel like home anymore. Tonight it was a stage. And she, the quiet, invisible wife, was finally the one directing the scene. She walked into the bathroom, flicking on the light. The reflection staring back at her was calm, frighteningly so. Her eyes weren't red from crying anymore. Her face looked still, almost serene, like she'd accepted something irreversible. The mirror behind her caught the faint glow of the nightstand, his side of the bed, the drawer where he kept his secrets. She opened it. Inside were the usual things, a phone, charger, loose change, that small white bottle tucked neatly in the corner, the one she'd seen him hide once when she walked in too soon. She picked it up, turning it over in her palm, the cheap label, the smug memory behind it. For a long moment she just stared. Then she set it on the counter beside her and opened the cabinet under the sink. Her fingers searched through cleaning supplies, bleach, polish, solvents, until they found it. A small industrial tube she'd bought months ago for home repairs. Fast-drying, clear, permanent. She read the warning label, strong adhesion, bonds instantly, irreversible once set. Her lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. She placed both bottles side by side, his lube and the glue, same size, same color. The absurdity of it almost made her laugh. But this wasn't rage anymore. Rage was messy, loud. This was something sharper, cleaner. She unscrewed the lids carefully, the faint chemical scent rising in the air. Her movements were slow. Deliberate, the rhythm of someone who'd planned everything 1,000 times in her head. She poured, switched, sealed, and wiped the edges clean, every step measured, every breath even. When it was done, she stood there for a moment, looking down at the bottle. One tiny thing, so ordinary, and yet it held the weight of everything he'd broken in her. She washed her hands, dried them, and placed the bottle gently on a towel. Then she went to the bedroom, setting it exactly where he always kept it, on the nightstand, under the soft glow of the lamp. The room smelled faintly of his cologne. A smell that once meant comfort, now only disgust. She sat on the edge of the bed and looked around. The photographs, the curtains she picked out, the quiet. It felt like the end of something sacred, and the beginning of something truer. As she stood, she noticed a framed photo of the two of them on the dresser, their smiles perfect, their hands intertwined. She picked it up and traced the glass lightly with her thumb. "How many times did you lie with that same face?" she whispered. Her voice didn't tremble. It sounded detached, almost curious, like she was studying someone else's life. She placed the photo face down. In the kitchen she made tea, the smallest, simplest act. Steam curled into the air as she leaned on the counter, the cup warm between her palms. Her mind drifted, not to the affair, not to the texts or the scent of perfume that wasn't hers, but to the feeling of being erased. That was what she couldn't forgive. Not the cheating, the erasure. He had taken her devotion and turned it into invisibility. And tonight she was done being invisible. She finished her tea, rinsed the cup and looked out the window. The street was quiet now, bathed in soft yellow light. From somewhere far off she could hear laughter, maybe theirs. It didn't sting anymore. She went upstairs, turned off the lights one by one and paused by the bedroom door. The house felt weightless, stripped of its illusions. Her chest rose slowly with a breath that felt free. She looked at the nightstand one last time. The bottle gleamed faintly under the lamp. Her hand brushed against it, light final. "Tomorrow night," she murmured, her voice steady. "Tomorrow night." She turned off the lamp. The house fell into darkness. The night unfolded exactly as she planned, quiet, domestic, ordinary. Dinner was on the stove, the TV murmured softly in the background, and her husband scrolled through his phone, half listening to her small talk. She moved around him like air, calm, efficient, invisible. That was how he liked her. That was how she'd survived. But tonight, invisibility was her weapon. "Headache again?" he asked absently, fork tapping against his plate. She nodded, pressing her fingers lightly to her temple. "Yeah, you should relax tonight, maybe call your friend, the one from work." His eyes flicked up, cautious for a moment, then softened into a smirk. "You sure?" "Of course," she said, her tone even, almost indulgent. "You've been so stressed lately, you deserve a break." He smiled, the kind of smile that used to melt her. Now it just looked cheap. "Thanks, babe," he said, kissing her cheek on his way to the bedroom. "Don't wait up." As soon as the door shut, she stood perfectly still, listening. His footsteps, the low hum of his voice, the faint sound of him dialing someone. Her lips curled faintly. She walked to the hallway closet and opened it, revealing a small row of hidden cameras, sleek, wireless, nearly invisible. They had been installed days ago, under the guise of security updates. One in the bedroom lamp. One above the dresser mirror. One facing the bed. Her fingers brushed the small monitor in her pocket, confirming they were all live. Every sound, every movement, every betrayal now recorded in high definition. She wasn't just watching her husband cheat. She was documenting her freedom. From the living room, she could hear laughter through the walls, low, breathy, familiar. The kind of laughter that once belonged to her. She poured herself a glass of wine and sat on the couch, her posture calm, her heartbeat steady. She didn't need to see the screen. She already knew what was happening. The faint click of the nightstand drawer. The soft shuffle of fabric. His careless voice, "Got it right here, baby." Her eyes drifted toward the ceiling. The cameras blinked red, recording. Upstairs, the sound changed. Laughter cut off. Then chaos. A muffled grunt. The cry. Then screaming. She didn't move. Not even when a glass toppled from the counter and shattered at her feet. The sound grew louder, panicked, heavy thuds, desperate voices. And then the kind of noise that made even the walls seem to recoil. Pure, unfiltered pain. She stood slowly. Walked to the bottom of the staircase and looked up. The door to the bedroom was half closed, a strip of light cutting across the hall. Shadows flailed inside, frantic, struggling. Her husband's voice tore through the air. "Help, oh God, it's stuck, it's..." The woman's scream overlapped his, high-pitched and animalistic. The wife's face didn't change. Her hand rested lightly on the railing, the other holding her wine glass steady. She tilted her head, listening, almost curious. It wasn't satisfaction she felt. It was release. For the first time in years, he was the one trapped. He was the one who couldn't walk away. Minutes passed. The chaos upstairs turned into pounding, fists against the wall, the sound of furniture crashing. Then came the knocking, frantic, from outside this time. A neighbor's voice called out, panicked. "Is everything okay in there?" we heard screaming. She didn't answer. She just turned toward the sound of the sirens growing closer, a calm smile tugging at her lips. Through the front window, the red and blue lights began to flicker against the glass. Flashing, pulsing, painting the house in warning colors. Inside she stood in her robe, expression unreadable, the perfect portrait of a stunned, concerned wife. Behind her the screams continued, louder now, desperate, begging. She picked up her phone, her voice smooth as silk. "Yes, there's been some kind of accident," she said, her tone trembling just enough to sound believable. "I think you should come quickly." Her hand didn't shake. Not once. She stepped outside before the firefighters arrived, letting the cold night air hit her face. Neighbors stood in clusters, murmuring, pointing, gasping. "Something's wrong in there," one whispered. "They're screaming like..." The sound of sirens drowned them out. Flashing lights, boots on pavement, the metallic clang of equipment. The front door burst open. Voices shouted orders. A medic ran past her. And above it all, the muffled, pitiful sound of her husband's voice, sobbing through the chaos. She took a deep breath. For the first time in forever. It didn't hurt to breathe. The sirens screamed louder than the people inside. Red lights strobed across the white walls of their suburban home, turning every corner into a crime scene. The wife stood barefoot on the porch, wrapped in her grey robe, the steam from her tea rising like fog around her face. Her expression was unreadable, neither horror nor satisfaction. Just stillness. Neighbors had gathered on the sidewalk in nightclothes and slippers, whispering. Some filmed on their phones, others crossed themselves. Then the fire truck pulled up. "Ma'am, are you the homeowner?" a firefighter asked, rushing toward her. She nodded faintly. "Yes, I think there's been an accident." "Where are they?" "Upstairs," she said quietly, gesturing with her cup. "The bedroom." He blinked, surprised by her calm. "Are they conscious?" A small pause, then, "Unfortunately." Inside, the paramedics froze halfway up the stairs. Even hardened professionals, people who'd seen gunshot wounds, car wrecks and overdoses, stumbled back at what they found. Two bodies tangled together in a grotesque knot of skin and sweat, screaming, crying, begging. A man and a woman, stripped bare, fused in the most humiliating way imaginable. "Jesus Christ," one firefighter muttered under his breath. "Cut the sheets first," another shouted, "then we'll figure out how to separate them." But every movement made them scream louder. The adhesive had hardened fast, flesh tore when they tried to pull apart. The husband's voice cracked, wild with panic. "Do something, it's glue, she put something, oh God." The mistress sobbed uncontrollably. Please get it off me." Downstairs, the wife stirred her tea. The captain came down, face pale, sweat beading on his brow. "Ma'am, do you know what kind of glue this is? We need to tell the paramedics before they cause more damage." She looked up slowly. Industrial grade, construction adhesive, waterproof. His eyes widened. "That could cause chemical burns, how did?" She cut him off gently. "You should hurry, they sound uncomfortable." Her tone was so mild it chilled him. Camera flashes began from outside the house. The neighbors had called not just the police, but the local news. One reporter arrived before dawn, eager for a headline. "Domestic disturbance turns bizarre," the first tweet read. Suburban couple found glued together during affair. Within an hour, it was everywhere. Upstairs, the chaos continued. The husband howled as paramedics coated their bodies in solvent, trying to break the seal without tearing too much skin. The mistress clutched a blanket to her chest, shaking, her mascara running down her face like black rain. And the wife? She stayed where she was, on the porch, watching the reflection of red lights on her tea, every flicker a heartbeat of justice. A young police officer approached cautiously. "Ma'am, we'll need to take your statement." "Of course," she said softly. "Do you want me to start from when I found out or when I stopped caring?" He hesitated. You knew about the affair." Her eyes flicked toward the upstairs window, where the shadow of her husband's face appeared for just a moment, smeared with tears, disbelief, and something close to fear. "Knew," she echoed faintly. "No, I learned." The officer swallowed. "And this wasn't an accident, was it?" A small smile ghosted her lips. "Let's just say they finally got stuck with the truth." When the paramedics finally carried the two lovers out, wrapped in separate blankets but still partially fused, the flash of cameras lit up the entire street. The crowd gasped, murmured, pointed. The husband kept his head down, trying to hide his face, but it was too late. The moment would live forever. And through the chaos, the wife stood at the top of the porch steps, calm and dignified, like the last witness to a fire she'd quietly started and carefully watched burn. A reporter shouted from the crowd, microphone raised. "Ma'am, did you know what was happening upstairs?" She met the reporter's eyes. For the first time that night, she smiled, not cruelly but with eerie serenity. "I knew exactly what was happening," she said, "for years." The camera bulbs flashed, freezing her in that moment. Hair tousled, robe cinched at the waist, eyes glinting with something sharp and ancient. "Not madness, not vengeance, just truth." Hours later, when the street finally cleared, she stepped inside, closed the door and sat at the kitchen table. The tea had gone cold. The cameras upstairs still blinked red. Everything was recorded, every scream, every lie. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small flash drive. Labeled in neat handwriting, "Insurance." She placed it in a drawer, right next to her wedding ring. By morning, their street wasn't just a crime scene, it was a headline. Suburban affair turns into sticky situation. Wife's cold revenge glues couple, literally. Local executive caught in intimate disaster. The story spread faster than truth could catch up. Clips of firefighters carrying two half-covered figures onto a stretcher replayed on loop, blurred faces, but everyone knew who they were. At the office, his name disappeared overnight. His company issued a short statement. "Mr. Wexler has been placed on immediate leave pending an internal review." Translation: he was finished. The mistress's husband filed for divorce within 24 hours. He didn't yell or cry, just handed her the papers across the hospital bed, where she lay recovering from chemical burns and shame. The internet turned the whole story into memes. Glugate trended for 3 days straight. Late-night hosts couldn't resist. One joked, well, at least they finally stuck together. Everywhere she went, the grocery store, the cafe, even her morning walks, people whispered, "That's her. The glue woman's. Did you hear, she's the one who caught him." She never confirmed it. She never denied it. She just went on living, watering her plants, feeding the stray cat that slept on her porch, humming softly as she folded laundry. But sometimes at night, she'd look out the window at the empty side of the bed and think, "I didn't do it for revenge. I did it to end the noise." The divorce papers arrived by courier. 2 envelopes, his and hers. She opened them at the kitchen table, the same table where she once waited for him to come home, the same table where she'd poured tea while sirens wailed outside. The pen felt heavy in her hand. Her signature, neat, precise, final. Freedom had a sound that night, the soft scrape of paper sliding across wood. She smiled faintly, not out of triumph but peace. A week later, she overheard a pair of teenagers on the sidewalk. "Dude, that's her house." "No way, the glue lady, for real." "She's a legend." The word made her laugh, quiet, breathless laughter that startled even her. A legend. That was one way to describe a woman who'd lost everything and found herself. Then one rainy evening, a knock echoed through the empty house. She froze. Not out of fear but something else, the uneasy recognition of ghosts that never stay buried. When she opened the door, he was there. Her husband, or what was left of him. He looked older, thinner, broken in ways pride couldn't hide. His eyes were bloodshot, his clothes soaked through. I didn't know where else to go, he said, voice trembling. They fired me, everyone knows, I can't even show my face anywhere. She said nothing, the sound of the rain filled the silence between them. I messed up, he continued. I messed everything up, but please, please don't leave me like this, you don't know what it's been like. She interrupted softly, oh, I do. He flinched. I lived with lies every day, she said, voice calm but cold. Do you know what that's like, to share a bed with someone who isn't really there? He dropped to his knees on the porch, tears mixing with rainwater. I deserve it, I know, but I can't lose you, I just... She looked down at him, her face unreadable. You already did, she said. And then, gently, she closed the door. She leaned her back against it, breathing in the silence, that beautiful, long-awaited silence. No more lies. No more waiting. No more pretending. Outside, the rain kept falling. Inside, she made herself a cup of tea and smiled faintly as thunder rolled over the street. The rain had stopped by morning, but the world outside still looked washed clean, like it had rinsed itself of everything old and rotten. She sat at the kitchen table again, sipping her tea when she heard it, a knock. 3 soft taps, hesitant, familiar. She didn't need to check who it was, she already knew. When she opened the door, there he was, her husband, holding a wilted bouquet of convenience store flowers. The plastic wrap still clung to the stems. His eyes were swollen, his voice shaking. Please, he whispered, just listen to me. She stepped aside, wordless, and he entered like a ghost who'd lost his way home. The house was different now, lighter somehow. She repainted the walls, changed the curtains, moved the furniture. The scent of lavender hung in the air instead of his cologne. It wasn't their home anymore, it was hers. He looked around, the silence pressing down on him. It feels different, he said softly. It is, she replied. He sat at the table, the one where she had signed the divorce papers. His hands shook as he placed the flowers down. I made a mistake, he said finally, his voice cracking. I was stupid, I threw everything away, I know that now. She studied him, the same man who once promised forever, who had betrayed that promise for something cheap and temporary. But all she felt now was distance. You didn't make a mistake, she said quietly. He looked up, confused. You made a choice. The words hit harder than any slap. He tried to speak to defend himself, but she raised a hand. You chose excitement over loyalty, lies over truth, yourself over us. He buried his face in his palms. I don't even know why I did it, he muttered. She stood, her tone almost kind. You did it because you could, because you thought I'd always be here, waiting. He lifted his head, tears cutting lines down his cheeks. I'm begging you, please, I can change, I'll do anything. Her expression didn't waver. You already had everything, you just didn't know how to keep it. The clock ticked in the background, the same sound that once marked their mornings, their meals, their shared silences. Now it only counted the seconds until he left. She walked to the front door and opened it. You should go. He froze, trembling. You really won't even try. She looked at him, not with anger, but with something gentler, sadder. You ended this long before the glue ever dried. He stood there, searching her face for any trace of the woman who once loved him. But she was gone, replaced by someone stronger, quieter, freer. Finally he nodded. I'm sorry, he whispered. I know, she said simply. He turned to leave, shoulders slumped, defeated. But just before he stepped out, something caught his eye, a pair of men's shoes neatly placed by the door, polished, new. He hesitated, his voice faltering. Someone been here. She smiled faintly. Someone is here. His mouth opened, but no words came out. She met his eyes one last time, steady and calm. Don't worry, he's not married. And with that, she closed the door behind him. Inside, she exhaled slowly, not from relief, but from closure. She walked past the table where the flowers still lay untouched, their plastic wrap glinting under the morning light. She picked them up, unwrapped them, and placed them in a vase filled with fresh water. New beginnings deserved real care, even if they came wrapped in old mistakes. The waves rolled in soft and steady, no drama, no noise, just rhythm. the kind of peace that had felt impossible once. She sat on the sand, barefoot, the hem of her white sundress brushing against the tide. The same beach where she once cried, wondering how her life had fallen apart. Now she laughed. A sound she hadn't heard from herself in years. Her hair danced in the wind, her phone lay untouched beside her, and for the first time she didn't care about messages, calls, or explanations. Behind her, a group of women were setting up folding chairs and a small bonfire, her friends from the women's centre. Divorcees, widows, survivors of all the ways love could go wrong. Together, they'd turned pain into purpose. One of them, Clara, waved, "Come on, we're starting the fire." She smiled and stood brushing sand from her hands. "Give me a minute." She turned back toward the horizon, watching the sky melt into gold. The world looked endless again. Voiceover, her inner monologue. People think revenge makes you bitter, but they don't understand it's not about payback. It's about taking back the part of you they tried to break. She remembered the night of the chaos, sirens, reporters, whispers, the look on his face when the glue held tighter than his promises. She didn't feel guilt anymore, only peace. Voiceover continues. Some women break, some rebuild. And some just get even. The camera of life had moved on from heartbreak to healing. She walked toward her friends, their laughter blending with the sound of waves. Someone handed her a mug of cocoa, warm against her palms. "You seem lighter these days," Clara said. She nodded, "Maybe because I finally stopped carrying someone else's mistakes." They sat in a circle, the fire crackling between them. Faces glowing in the orange light, eyes reflecting both pain and strength. She looked around at women who had once believed their lives ended with betrayal, now rebuilding, smiling, living. Healing wasn't dramatic, it was quiet, subtle, like the tide washing away footprints no longer meant to stay. A small breeze brushed past her face. For a second she could almost hear her own voice from the past, fragile, unsure. Now it was gone, replaced by someone new. Voiceover, final reflection. He taught me that love isn't blind. It just takes time to see clearly. The camera pans out, her laughter blending into the sea breeze, the waves shimmering under the sunset. Peaceful, infinite, cleansing.